You know, modern technology has given us the ability to literally dance at two chasanas at the same time. And so here I am attending my daughter's parent-teacher conferences while I am getting ready to learn together with you all. Oh, that's confident. That's HIPAA. It doesn't make a difference at this point, right? If I'm parent-teacher conferences with my daughters who are in school in Forest Hills or my daughters who are in school in Florida, at this point it doesn't matter because it's the same Zoom, right? Yeah. So but just to follow up a little bit from last week, this is the challenge when dancing at more than one chasana of being scattered. The problem is being scattered, right? Now, what's wrong with being scattered? Spiritually, being scattered is problematic. Being scattered spiritually is problematic because so we have to take a step into the meditative mind for a moment and think about some of the things that we've learned so far. We've learned that everything is a manifestation of God's will. All of existence is a manifestation of God's creative choice, creative energy. And therefore, we can truly say, Shema Yisrael. Pay attention, meditate, listen, Jew. Whatever Jew is closest to the lips of the one saying Shema Yisrael, and that's me, right? I'm the one who's closest to myself as I say Shema Yisrael. So listen, Jew. Havaya Elokeinu. Havaya is the Kabbalist way of referring to God's name that is written Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the four-letter name of God. And the Kabbalists would say Havaya as a way of differentiating between the other names of God. You just say Hashem, that's a non-technical term. Hashem means the name. The Kabbalist wants to know exactly which name are you not saying right now. Because each name has its own meditation. Each name has its own intention. So the name Havaya indicates that everything was, is, and will be being itself. That, again, so that's past, present, and future. And being itself, existence itself, from its potential into the actual, Havaya Elokeinu, results that infinite inner source, the very beginning of life, before there was anything, before there was a past, a present, or a future. All of that, the first context, the essence, the source of everything, which first gave rise to the possibility of anything, which first gave rise to the possibility of existence, which then exists in the past, the present, and the future. But for the source of everything, it's all one. Havaya, the everything in the past, the present, and the future, the source of existence, Elokeinu, is what has given rise to my own life. And so here I am experiencing the fact that I am alive, but my meditation is that Havaya Elokeinu, that this life that I have is really an expression of Havaya, an expression of Hayahu V'Yeh, that which was, is, and always will be. It's an expression of the origins of everything in which past, present, and future are one. And then we conclude, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya, the source, the past, present, and future, the origins of everything, Elokeinu is what has given rise to my own life. Havaya Echad, and thus it is all one. Okay, so this is the Kabbalistic meditation with which we start with. Now, going back to our first point, being scattered is spiritually problematic, because when we're scattered, it means that we're not conscious of the Echad, of the oneness. We're dispersed between different places. We feel torn between different places. That means that we experience a conflict in past, present, future. We feel a conflict from being pulled in different directions. But if we are conscious that it's all from the Hayahu V'Yeh, it's all from the Havaya, and it's that gives rise to Elokeinu, to the experience of my life, then Havaya Echad, we can experience that it's all one, and we can have peace. But more than peace, we are connected to the truth of the divine reality in which it's all one. So now, going back to my point, I think being on two Zooms at once, potential, which I just was, right? Potentially is a way, can be scattering, but it can also be profoundly unifying. So you can feel pulled into two different directions, or you can say, I'm experiencing that all the universes, all the different perspectives, all the different places on earth can all, if I concentrate on them correctly, I can bring them all into the Echad. I can make myself conscious that they're all one. I can unify them in my mind, in my consciousness. Because in fact, they are unified. It's only my consciousness that causes me to differentiate. Okay, so let's do that. I'm gonna review that point again. And before I do that, I want to say Shalom Aleichem to all those who are here in person and to all those who are here on the Zoom. Just to summarize what we said so far. The truth of the universe, the ultimate truth taught in Jewish teaching, is that everything is truly one when it's meaning the truth of the divine reality from the perspective of the origin of everything, from the perspective of the divine source of the universe. Everything is a manifestation, is an expression of the divine source, and therefore everything is one. It's only from the perspective of the creation, again, from the perspective of the creator, everything is one. From the perspective of creation, we are separate beings. Each of us is a separate creation. So this is the importance of our meditation. For example, in the daily prayers, the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad. Hear, O Israel, listen, meditate, pay attention, become aware. Havaya, our first origins, the source of everything. Elokeinu is what has given rise to my experience, to my life, that I feel separate. Havaya Echad, I feel as an individual, yes. Havaya Echad, in truth, it's all one. And one day, and it's possible for the universe to be conscious of this. This is all of the work of our life as Jews following the Torah, ultimately, is to bring oneness, is to bring unity. Not only because oneness feels good, unity feels good, because it is a reflection of the ultimate truth of the divine reality. So we experience it as good, as subjectively good. But I'd like us to consider how objectively, on a spiritual level, unity represents the highest truth possible. Because it represents being connected, being conscious of the source of oneness, the source of everything in which we are all one. And I want to take a step for a moment to just consider that there are two types of unities. There is unity, which is a partnership of convenience. Partnership of convenience is I'm going to help you and you're going to help me. So in a sense, there is some kind of unity. But there isn't true unity. There is collaboration, not oneness. On the contrary, these two entities, my collaboration with you is there in order to foster my individualism. I will become a stronger and healthier and more successful individual through my cooperation with you. And in turn, I don't mind the fact that you'll also become, in this win-win mutual collaboration, that you will become a more successful, more happy individual through your collaboration with me. So this collaboration is not true oneness, because we still remain individuals, and on the contrary, our individualism becomes more my separateness as an individual, I'm going to say this in the kindest possible terms, but nonetheless, it's at the root of everything. My ego, myself, will be bolstered, will be strengthened, will become supported even more through my collaboration with you. So sometimes collaboration can seem like unity, but it's actually self-serving. Right? So again, we can talk about how, in this meditation, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, the first Havaya, the first time we say the name of Havaya, we're saying that in reality, from the divine perspective, in the divine reality, we are all one. So whether I experience myself as an individual, whether I experience myself in conflict with the universe or not, doesn't matter. Right? Because in the divine perspective, from the perspective of the Creator, in truth, everything is one. Then we go into the Elokeinu, and then, but yet, so I recognize that is in truth. And then, of course, Elokeinu, I experience myself as an individual, and I can meditate through that experience of individualism, and through that experience, I can come to know, I can come to be aware of the fact, I can have awareness of the oneness of the universe, and that's the ultimate coherence that we bring into this chaos. So this unity, going back to this unity of convenience, the collaboration that strengthens my individualism, on the first Havaya level, it's reflecting reality, right? The fact is, we're collaborating, so we're closer to the divine reality. So I'm saying it's not a bad thing, right? It's better than being in chaos. It's better than being divided. But it isn't true oneness, because while logistically we have oneness, consciously we don't have oneness. And for oneness, for us to bring the oneness into everything, that's our work in the Torah and in the mitzvos, is to bring the oneness of God into everything. And so that requires that our oneness be present not only in the logistics and in the practical and physical aspects of life, but also in the emotional and conscious and intellectual aspects of life. And this is why we're meditating. It's to bring the awareness of oneness into our mind, which is an important place for the oneness to exist. Okay? So what do we say so far? You want a clarification? You have a question? Or should I say my review and then you follow up? Okay. We're saying that the truth of the universe is that Havaya Elokeinu Havaya Echad. The truth of the universe is that since we all originate from the same source, from the perspective of the source, we are all emanations from him, so to speak. And therefore, we are all one. In our own experience, we experience ourselves as individuals. Our work is, in the individual experience, to become conscious of the one. Havaya Elokeinu Havaya Echad. We can experience oneness, collaboration, unity on a logistical level when we work together with somebody else, even though that is still allowing my individual self to be intact and even strengthening it. But there is a dimension in which the divine reality of oneness is reflected. There are circumstances that, right, there is a fact that two people are now integrated with each other. And that is a demonstration on a certain level of divine oneness. But what's missing is the intellectual, the cognitive oneness, the awareness of the oneness. The presence of Echad, the presence of one, needs to be in everywhere and everything, including our brains, which is why we meditate. We meditate Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, in order to bring the oneness of God into consciousness. Because, in fact, it's everywhere anyways, but it's not necessarily in our consciousness unless we meditate upon it. Okay, go ahead, Robin.
I don't understand why you're spending so much time on oneness. Duality never, ever, ever was in my thought processing. I know I'm alone in so many things. So why is there so much expounding on oneness?
So Robin asks, the duality isn't real to me. So why am I talking about the oneness? Right? So
that sounds like using idol worship.
So here's what I want to say. So are we trying to differentiate ourselves from idol worship? No. What I'm trying to differentiate myself from is being in conflict with others. If I am in conflict with others, or I'm in conflict with some aspect of life, so there are two ways of looking at it. There's a negative way, which is if I am in conflict with others, then I am in some way not manifesting the oneness, the interconnectedness of everything and its source in the one of Hashem. Another way of thinking about this, and this is our topic tonight, is there are practices that we do that continually demonstrate this oneness. One of the ways that we demonstrate oneness is through showing the interconnectedness of human life. How all of the different species interact with each other and collaborate with each other and support each other's existence. How all of the world is really one or mutually supportive organism that's something that shows its oneness in the divine. Now I want to say one, does that answer your question? No. Okay. Let me take a step forward.
I've read this week's chapter and I have no questions about that.
I'm not doing this week's chapter.
Okay, you guys.
I'm doing my own
You
thing
have
tonight.
to believe.
Huh?
You have to believe, but it's not this. To meditate, to remove all your thought, your issue, your problem, and just to focus. The way they bonet on what? If your thought goes back to what issue that you're facing this moment, or issue that you're facing with your mother, with your husband, whatever, how could you do that? You're not God.
Right.
All right. So how could you do that? How could you? All right. When I come to the temple, I pray.
Right.
So my mind is there.
Right.
But how could you do that? You cannot do that
all the time. Right.
It's very, very hard.
That's true. That's true.
You have to be God to do that.
So that's true. But and on a certain level, Bracha, we are God.
Yeah,
On a certain level, we are, because we're not, well, our body also. Meaning, what part of the world is not, what part of the world is outside of God? If we truly say Hashem Echad, what part of the world is outside of God? So then the question is our consciousness, are we aware of ourselves as being within God? Are we in coherence with, are we consistent with the divine reality that everything is within Him? Or do I experience myself as being an individual who needs to be, who needs certain things, and who is and who can sometimes be in, as you said, Bracha, who can sometimes be in conflict with other human beings, or who can sometimes be in conflict with another part of the universe. Right? So you're right, this is hard. And this really brings the question, which is the step forward that I wanted to go to, which is, if you think about it, from the divine oneness, from the perspective of the divine oneness, the emergence of the individual is a problem. All problems in life stem from the concealment of the divine oneness and from the emergence of the separate individual. Basically, think about any socially toxic dynamic, fights between people, theft, abuse, all the problems in society. I experience myself as being inadequate, anxiety, fear, anger. All of these emerge out of that phenomenon called the self. Because in the divine oneness, there's no room for theft. There's no room for abuse. It's not possible. You would hit your own hand. So the victim doesn't experience themselves a victim, and the abuser is not an abuser. Now, I'm not saying that abuse is okay. I'm just saying that this whole thing, all these problems only exist in this self-oriented dimension. The self-oriented dimension is filled with pain, is filled with problems. It's basically a recipe for every and any disaster. This self. When, however, so what good could possibly come within this experience of the self? What good could possibly come within that? Yeah.
This meditative prayer was written at a time when people doubted the existence of only one God.
No. We have to clarify. I see now what the problem is. When we say Hashem Echad, we are not saying that there is only one God and not two. So glad you pushed forward there.
Okay.
We are not saying that there is only one God and not two. We are saying that there is only really one thing at all. And that's God. I and you and you and you and you and the computer and all the people in the Zoom and all the different Zooms are all of Echad. They are all really an expression. They are one expression. We all trace back to one. Not only do we trace back to one source, if we trace back to one source, then we are still one. We are still one. If God is infinite, then what is outside of him? And if nothing is outside of him, then there really is only one thing, and that's God. And so there's no husband, and there's no wife, and there's no job, and there's no goyim, and there's no nothing. There's no hunger, there's no pain, there's no suffering, there's no anxiety, there's no fear, there's no stealing, there's no giving, there's no tzedakah, there's no nothing.
What does that mean?
Not one and two. It means, so that you're going to ask me a good question. It's what I'm saying. When we say one, we normally think of one in the context of two. One and then two and then three. So one means that it's possible to have two. On the other hand, it's also another way of saying would be unified. Yachid would mean unified. Everything is unified in the oneness. Right? Everything is unified in the oneness. Come sit, Rabbi Hillel, come sit right here. Right? So why do we say Echad? Because right. Why don't we say Hashem? What I'm describing would perhaps be more accurately reflected in the term Hashem Yachid. God, everything is unified. Everything can be gathered into the oneness of God. But the problem with Yachid is that it indicates, if we use the term unified, right, then it indicates that there are separate things. There's still this concept of separateness that is gathered together. But if I say Echad, it's one, then I'm saying there really is only one. It does give rise to this question that you're asking. Yeah, I hear the problem, but what the Torah wants us to understand is that if you can reduce something down, instead of yachid or unified, which means everything is included into it, instead if you could reduce everything down to the most elemental reality, if you can get down to the smallest, everything is really just that. Go back to the very beginning. Go back to step one. Everything is still there. Still step one. Everything, there really is only one thing, and that's God. And that's the divine reality. Okay? This is something that is not possible for a human being to fully understand, because we exist in the problematic dimension of human individualism, right? We exist in the dimension of Elohim, of human individualism. Bereshis bara Elohim. Elokeinu, our God, right? In which there can be an hour. There can be a plural. In which there can be a plural possessive, Elokeinu, our, right? That's the plural possessive, right? We exist in the world in which it's possible to have a plural possessive. If it's possible to have plural possessive, then it's possible to have theft. It's possible to have anxiety. It's possible to have fear. It's possible to have loss. It's possible, right? It's possible. All these problems. So now we're back to this question. So what good? So all the problems in life come from this Elokeinu dimension, come from this separate dimension. What good possibly could there be in all of this? And that is, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I could see how I was distracting.
Okay. I'm sure there's plenty written on this.
But the point is we have to bring our mind, there is plenty written on this. And our work is to try and push our mind into the consciousness, into awareness of this. That's what we're here to do. Okay, so this was a big preamble. Okay, any comments from the online participants so far? Comments or questions, clarifications? Anything surprising? If you want to say something that jumped out at you, something that you think I said, or that you could say better than the way that you could possibly say it in your own words and people would maybe hear it differently. Sometimes the reason I say that is because sometimes that happens to me. I'll hear a teacher teaching and I'll think to myself, oh, what he's saying is this. And I could put it in my own words, and it's geschmack to me to say it to myself in my own words. So I wonder if you have that experience, if you want to go ahead and give that a try.
Who doesn't know what he missed?
Okay. But he was there in the oneness of everything. Okay. So this is, let's say like this. I want to find this text here. I'm going to jump around a little bit today.
Rabbi, excuse me, I wanted to ask you something.
Esther, go ahead.
A little bit earlier when you said there is nothing exists, there's no thoughts, there's no people, there's nothing. Is that meaning for the people that don't believe that there is Hashem?
Oh, good question. No, the question was, when I say that in truth, there's only one, and therefore there's nothing, on that dimension, there isn't anything. And the question was, is that applying to people who don't believe in Hashem? The answer is no, of course. It applies to everything and nothing, really, because after all, Hashem created the reality. Hashem emanated this universe in which there are truly many things, right? But from the perspective of the Creator, everything was only emanated from Him and within Him. So it's all still within Him. So the reality is that it's all just Him, still Him. It's only in our experience as human beings. So Esther, on the contrary, since we don't feel Him, since we don't feel the divine reality, we don't feel the truth that we're all really just Him, we feel ourselves to be separate, and we feel to have anxiety, and we feel to have loss, and we feel to have gain, and we feel to have all those kinds of things that we could have. Right? So both things exist at the same time. One is a divine reality, and the other is a reality created by the divine. We live in the reality creation. We live in the created reality by the divine, in which we feel ourselves as individuals. But there is an inner divine reality, which is connected to the source of everything, in which everything is one. Does that answer your question, Esther?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to text 15. Page 170. So what goodness comes out of this fact, out of this created reality? How can we make good out of this created reality, which really makes so many problems? So the Midrash says as follows, and this is one of the fundamental teachings in Chabad meditative tradition. The entire purpose of creation is to create a home for God within the material world. And by the material world, we're talking about the mind space of separateness. A realm of existence that sits at the bottom of all creation. That's the furthest place, the furthest headspace from the divine awareness is the experience of being a human being. Or even less, the experience of being an animal or a plant, having no consciousness, let's leave it. Let's just start with it. Let's stay with ourselves, okay? The experience of being a human being, a separate individual who has all the aforementioned problems, is the furthest that one could possibly be from the divine reality. And what God wanted is that we would create a home, we would open up within this state of mind, awareness of the divine. Now, I want to go to the Hebrew text, if you're able to. Shetachlis berias ha'olam, the ultimate value in the creation of this world. Olam means concealment. The creation of this world means the hiding, the concealing of the divine reality, the truth that all of us are one. Who it is? Shenis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God desired that he would have a dwelling place in the lowest states of consciousness, the human one. Ad betachton she'ein tachton lamata mimenu, up until the state of consciousness that there is none lower than it. I'm talking about you and me. Human consciousness. Reality, so let's just qualify. Reality, what is a thing? What is anything? What is it? What is it in relation to God?
The creation.
So if it's a creation, then it's one with God. When does it become separate from God? When we look at it. In the human consciousness, in our mindset, let's remember that the whole universe only exists in our own mind, right? Meaning, we're talking about the whole world. You're listening to me right now. And you're thinking about all these things that you think about. And I'm thinking about objects. You're thinking about all the objects that you can picture. And I'm thinking about all the objects that I can picture. And to me, hold on. And to me, those objects have different meaning than they do to you. It's the way you look at it. And so, for example, if I hold up, 1 second, if I hold up this dollar bill, right? So to somebody who lives in America, this dollar bill means value, right? To somebody who lives outside of America, let's say, this dollar bill is a pain because it means I have to go to the exchange, right? So my perspective on the object. So you talk about what is the significance of this object. You talk about the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is something that I think about. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm getting stuck on something which is maybe too hard to.
No, I thought that it's the place Hashem wants.
In your mindset,
That's the whole purpose.
in the Jewish mindset, again, this is a reality that stems from our consciousness. The Beis Hamikdash, the holiness of the temple, the holiness of the Sefer Torah, is something that stems from our consciousness and our awareness of it. Right? That's why it's kedusha. That's why it has HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? But I don't want to get too off the track. I want to stay on the subject here. Let's stay on the text. Shenis Ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God desired that he should dwell. He wanted to be at home. He wanted his reality to be reflected in the Tachtonim, in the lowest states of consciousness, which is the human consciousness. Herb, that's not a place. It's not an object. It's a brain. The human brain is the lowest state of consciousness possible. It's not a malach. It's not a Gan Eden. It's a self. We're not talking about Behema. We're talking about me. Why? Because Behema has no consciousness, right? So if Behema has if an animal has no consciousness, so he's not in conflict with Hashem. A human being can exist in conflict with himself. He can exist in conflict with Hashem. He can exist in conflict with his fellow human being. So that's the lowest state of consciousness possible. He can be selfish. Right? So if that's Tachtonim, that's the lowest possible. Right? The highest, we want to make a dwell. Let's stay here. Let's stay right here. Let's stay right here in myself. I want us to realize that what goes on in my brain emanates from God, and somehow it manages to ignore God. Not only to be unaware of God, but to actively, consciously ignore him. Right? That's Tachtonim. That's the lowest. That's Tachton she'ein Tachton lamata mimenu. That's the lowest state of consciousness beneath which there can be no lower. What good can possibly come of that? Shenis ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu ligios lo yisbarach dira b'tachtonim. God desired to have a dwelling place. He desired to make his home in that state of consciousness, that the human being would open themselves up and receive and be aware of that ultimate truth within the human mind, that problematic mind machine, the human, would ultimately become a divine consciousness machine. And a divine consciousness machine. Yeah, I was using a term, for lack of a better term, machine. That is the taiva. That's the desire. And it occurred to me as I thought about this subject, the word taiva, the word desire, is something that is hard to understand. I'm talking about God. God desires this oneness. God desires that this oneness would be expressed in the human mind. So it occurs to me that actually the model of desire is very interesting. Because when we desire a relationship, that comes out of separateness. It comes out of otherness. We don't desire. We desire what we feel distant from. And yet the most beautiful, romantic expressions in all of literature and in all of art are about this resolving of separateness into oneness. The distant becoming close. Desire lives in that space between distant and close. A relationship is all about somebody who thinks for themselves liking me. And that's what happens in this human dimension. is that a human being who thinks for himself, that's tachton, that's the lowest thing that could possibly exist, is thinking for yourself. But if this human being who thinks for himself can go and think of God, that's a taiva. That's desire. That's beautiful. And that, in a sense, gives meaning and resolution to this whole problem. It transforms the darkness into light. It transforms the bitter into the sweet. In this world, it's only in this space in which we can have selfishness and separateness and division and conflict and all that, in which people think for themselves and become selfish as a result, right? In that domain, it's possible to have somebody who thinks for themselves instead thinking of God, or the same self becomes itself conscious of God. That self, meaning, how does a human being become conscious of God? So he begins to think about what he thinks and what he cares about. And all of those self-oriented tools that are normally self-oriented tools become vehicles for closeness with God. That's a taiva. What is joy? What is so beautiful about a relationship is that the other person could really think for themselves, and they could really reject me. They could really be disinterested in me, and yet they're mamish interested in me. So there's something very beautiful about that, right? So that's a way of thinking about the beauty of what happens when a human being becomes in this world conscious of God. Joshua, you unmuted yourself for a second on purpose by accident.
It was by accident. My
Okay.
apologies.
There's no accidents. Maybe you have something to say.
Give me time.
Okay.
Remember what we spoke about, it's a miracle that people do it, right?
Yes.
So is it a miracle that you don't have consciousness of God when you have the ability to have consciousness? Is that what
Oh,
you opened the door?
I did.
It's okay.
The question was, I don't know. Let's save this. Let's come back to this question at the end, because let's save this question for the end. But don't forget the question, please. You want to write it down? You'll remember? Okay. Okay. So now we're gonna go to section D. Now we're gonna do some meditations.
So you're saying there are more people who don't connect to God than do connect to God?
Let's stay in our own mind. Meditation means, this is the difference between meditation. The question was, are there more people who connect to God than don't connect to God? The difference between meditation and philosophy is that philosophy is the description of other things. Meditation is bringing my mind to a state of awareness of a thing, meaning that I myself am going to try and experience the idea that I'm talking about. So I'm really going to try. That's why we do this whole thing with the closing the eyes and the breathing and the thinking, because it isn't about knowing about things. It's knowing the thing. Like not just you know about someone or you know them, I know of you or I know you, right? So we want to think about I know the idea, not I know of the idea. That's the difference between philosophy and meditation. Is that a clear distinction? Does anybody feel that you get what I'm saying? You're shrugging. That means I have to say weiter.
An idea is not.
Means like this.
You get a blank wall there, and you have the Aron Kodesh. That helps you get closer. I mean, something needs to help you rather than just think.
How you get there, what the thinking process is. I'm talking about what the goal of the thinking is, right? The goal of the thinking is that we should find this idea in my own life. Find where this idea is present in my experience. So that might be a meditation, different between so philosophy, you could talk about the Beis Hamikdash, right? But if the Beis Hamikdash is a thing in a book that I never saw, then it's not a meditation, right? If we're talking about, that's why people ask, what about Gentiles? If you're not a Gentile, then it's not a meditation. We want to talk, we want to stay with, what are the things that I know? What are the things that I experience? What do they mean? That's meditation. What does it mean? What does my experience mean? Not what is the nature of that thing. Verstehst? You might not like it, but do you understand what I'm saying? Am I clear or no?
No.
I'm not clear. Tell me back what you hear me say. We're going to do this all night, guys. Tell me back what you hear me saying. Please.
I don't accept what you're saying, so I can.
Okay, fine. So we'll do it later. That's why I asked if you could tell me back what I want you to Iron Man what I'm saying. You know, like,
I'm gonna
tell me what you.
meditate on what I get for me as a meditation.
You're going to meditate on what you get
No, I'm
for
not
you,
gonna
to bring you
meditate
closer.
on something that somebody else is
Right.
thinking about.
right.
It's gotta be something that resonates inside of me.
That's exactly
Okay?
right.
So if I go for a walk and I see a gorgeous flower, and I'm gonna say, what a creation, okay? And I ponder it and I think about it and I think, my gosh, Hashem's created so many things. And that instills within me to think about and meditate what a wonderful creator who's given us so many things. That's my meditation. I'm not thinking about anything else. Whatever happens to confront me at that moment, I'm going to think about.
Okay. Good. Let's move on. We're going to talk about eating. Eating is a profound opportunity for us to become aware of the oneness with God, the oneness of the universe with everything, and the oneness with God. There are two ways to experience. There's 3 ways to experience eating. 4 ways. One way is called distracted eating, where you're on your phone while you eat. This is not what we're talking about. The mindfulness experts would suggest that we not be on our phone while we eat so that we could eat mindfully and consciously. Okay, so not distracted eating, but mindful eating. Now let's have mindful eating. What am I doing when I eat mindfully? I experience the taste. I'm going to suggest to you a meditation that you can do. We're not going to do it now. We can experience the senses that are involved in the eating. We're going to experience the touch, the taste, and the smell, and even the sound of the wrapper crinkling, and the sight. Thank you. Right, what it looks like. For this, we have the delight of the senses. You hear the sizzling of the pan, right? The crunch, right? All those, this is the delight of the senses. In this sense, the more gourmet, the better. This is eating. Okay, so this is mindful eating, the mindfulness world. This is meditation, not meditation from Sinai, it's simply meditation. So I'll be aware and conscious of how delicious and delightful and enjoyable, or simply just being aware of the tastes and the senses and the sight and the smells and the sounds and the feel of the food, right? That's a mindfulness experience. Then, so this is really the experience of the self, and it also lends itself to the indulgence of the self. That is, in bloating, expanding the self, right? In which, right, physically, when we eat, we gain weight. But more important than gaining weight, from a spiritual perspective, when we eat mindfully, we expand, we cause our ego to expand and bloat. We become more spoiled, we become more indulgent, we become more self-served when we eat, especially when we eat mindfully.
Well, it's just the opposite. If you don't
Now,
eat mindfully, you're going to gain weight. If you eat
that's also true. Okay, that's true. That's true. I'm talking about gaining psychological weight, right?
Another way to satisfy the body.
Now, then there's the second stage, which is, so this is purely feeding the ego. Then there is the next level in which we eat nutritious food. So we're mindful and we're pay attention to the nutritional value, to the importance of eating healthy. And this is also this is also a mindful experience where we're aware of the healthy quality of the food and we eat intentionally and mindfully. And I want to suggest one step beyond all of that. I want to suggest one step beyond all of that. Okay. So what I want to do is go to a next level. And this is meditation from Sinai in eating. And this is based on what we said. Based on what we said earlier about the separateness of the universe and the taiva, the desire that is realized in the reuniting of the self with the divine, that the human being who thinks of himself, who thinks for himself, can think of God, which is the greatest taiva of all, the greatest desire of all, we could think about food. Because food involves three separatenesses. There is the human being who hungers. There is the plant, which appears to be a separate being in our consciousness. And then, of course, there is the divine reality in which everything is one. The act of eating brings all of those three things together. In actual fact, when we eat, we have brought all those three things together. The plant or the animal, the water, which was separate from the human, now becomes united with the human in the act of perpetuating God's creation. And it's a moment of taiva, it's a moment of desire, the reunification of separate things. And it's a moment in which, as we said earlier, echad, unification, oneness, is the ultimate manifestation of divine reality. And so eating is a kind of oneness, a logistical oneness, but also an energetic oneness, because there's an energy not an energy transfer. The energy that's there in the plant, the life-giving force, becomes subsumed into the human being. We become one. And so it's a great way of directing our consciousness in the immediate experience of where I am right now, to become conscious of the divine oneness. It's a way for us to become aware of this phenomenon happening in front of our eyes. And therefore, we would say before we eat, in order that we would be conscious of this, in order to become aware of this, we would say, Baruch, I am about to bless. Because blessing is to bring divine reality into something that didn't formally experience it. Ata, you, God, Havaya, the eternity was, is, and always will be, the source of everything. Elokeinu, which has given me life. as an individual, Melech Ha'olam, and I experience your hand in the world by having provided me Borei Peri Ha'adama, by having provided for me, by creating the fruits of the ground. Amen. We don't say Amen to our own bracha, of course, but bringing these fruits of the ground into me, by giving me the opportunity that the adama, the ground, should not just be ground, but it should be peri ha'adama, that there should be some bounty from the ground which can sustain me. That then brings me to the experience of Melech Ha'olam, that I experience your hand in the world, Elokeinu, in my life, Havaya. The truth is that it's all one. Ata, I experience your presence directly. Baruch, I have brought it into my consciousness. So this is the meditation that we do, but this is why it's so important to say barachas before we eat. So talking about, the Midrash puts this term beautifully in a cryptic way, and we learned it in school. And it, to me, always seemed kind of, I don't know, it didn't speak to me. But in this mystical context, it makes perfect sense. They say whoever eats without a bracha, it's as though he's stealing from God. How can you steal from God? The answer is that in the human mindset, when I'm feeding my ego, that's where theft exists. Theft exists where I am a self, and I'm going to take from there and appropriate it for me. There is the feeding of my, and that's what theft is. It's feeding my ego without regard for your rights. Feeding what I want without regard for your rights. However, once we say a bracha, it's not that we ask permission from God. There's no, they want to touch it out. And so in Hebrew school, we learn that it's like a bracha is asking permission from God to eat. That's not the text of the bracha. It's not the text of the blessing. It doesn't say, please God, may I eat this? But in saying the bracha, in directing our mind to the divine consciousness, we now become entitled. We're not entitled. We are recognizing that we are merged with the whole universe. And therefore, when I eat this thing, I'm not feeding my ego. It's just God feeding God. It's God's world becoming more integrated with itself. It's God's world becoming more integrated with itself. I am manifesting more unity in the world than was previously recognizable. Until now, you saw the plant and you saw the person and you think that they're two separate creatures. And then you see one eating the other and you realize that there is an ecosystem here. This is one mutually supportive organism. We understand that's Melech HaOlam, right? There is one world happening here. There is a guide to this world. There is an order to this world. And that brings our consciousness to Elokeinu, that our life has a source, Havaya. And that source is true oneness, is true unity in which there is no separateness. Baruch, and our life is the act of bringing that into reality. So we start with this intention, Baruch, I want to bring down a new reality, Ata. I want to bring the direct experience of God, Havaya, that is eternal and sublime and infinite and beyond space and time. And so I will direct my attention to Elokeinu, to the fact that I experience that my life has a source. I feel like I have needs. I didn't make myself. Melech HaOlam. There is an order to this universe. Borei Peri Ha'adama, and you have created the fruits of the ground, which will feed me, and which demonstrate this order of the universe, which is evidence of the fact that Elokeinu, that everything has a source, and that Havaya, the true source, is infinity. Okay, so that's the meditation of eating. That's the bracha. Okay, do I need to summarize that, or we got this? I just want to read, I want to read text 4b before you say something.
Okay.
Text 4b, page 157. This is a write it down quickly. This is, or text it to yourself. An analogy. A king once lost a precious, this is going into this whole idea of the separateness and the unity. Page 157. It's where it starts in Hebrew. Text 4b. An analogy. A king once lost a precious gem and wished his beloved son to have the great honor of being the one to successfully locate the gem. In truth, the gem was not lost. The king knew where it had been concealed, but engineered the ploy to give his beloved son the opportunity of earning it. The king also wanted the distinct pleasure of witnessing his son's hard-earned success. The king went so far as to drop his son a hint as to where the stone could be found. Okay, the analog is clear. The entire purpose for which God created this world is to enable us to retrieve the divine sparks that are lost within materiality, within separateness. For we are empowered to sublimate, that is, to absorb within ourselves all kosher and permissible food items. On this theme, the Baal Shem Tov revealed a fascinating mystical truth, talking about taiva, desire. Hungry, re'evim gam tzmeim nafshim behem tisatov. Hungry, thirsty, their soul enwraps itself in them. These words come to answer the question, why did God create us with craving for food and make our survival dependent on eating? The answer is that there are divine sparks, there are divine secrets trapped in material entities. These sparks long to cleave to holiness. They call out for assistance, and our souls hear their call and respond to their plight. Whenever we eat or drink, we sublimate the divine sparks in the food or drink that have called out to us to achieve spiritual elevation through us. Thus, the mystical meaning of the verse is this: Re'evim gam tzemeim, hungry as well as thirsty. Why do we experience hunger and thirst? Because their soul enwraps itself in them. Because the soul, the soul of the food, that is, the divine reality in the food, is in a state of exile and seeks liberation. And so God leaves hints for the Jewish people, indicating the various ways through which we will discover the lost entities, the separateness in the food, and return them to their rightful owner, to the oneness in the relationship with God, our Father in heaven. And so this can be, so there, and here in text 5, we differentiate between, right, between a person who eats gluttonously, in which they're just feeding their ego, and when a person eats for the sake of heaven, when a person eats in a divinely oriented way, we can manifest this idea that we are bringing out the divine oneness through eating. And that's what's alluded to in text 6, as I understand it. Okay. Let's take a deep breath. We'll go to the next place where we can experience this idea, and that is in sleep. Sleep is it may be the highest way of expressing divine consciousness. And that is because, remember what we said, you see how how they say, oh, the little kid's a monster, but when he sleeps, he looks like an angel, right? Truth is, everyone is like that. You look at any person, no matter how we feel about them, but you can't help but feel some softness for them when they're sleeping. The one reason for this might be that going back to this dialectic, or the dichotomy between the divine truth of oneness, that everything is an expression of God, and the problems start in the emergence of the self as individual and separate, When we sleep, we don't experience ourselves. And in that moment, we are truly one with the divine. It's such a godly place to be, sleeping. And so we can either go to sleep because, so there's two ways to think about sleep. We could either think about sleep because I'm tired, again, because I need to recharge myself. So I can wake up and I can be refreshed to do what I want to do again. That's that's tachtoinen. That's lower consciousness. Then there's the next level consciousness in which we can be aware that sleep is restorative so that I can serve God. And then the next level that we could think about it is that sleep is a way to bring us to this idea, as we talked last week, about renewal. Renewal. It's a new chance. But now I want to talk about how sleep itself is a sacred moment, the meditation of sleep. This really only happens, we can't do this while we're sleeping, but we can be conscious of this right before we go to sleep. And this is why we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, before we go to sleep. That's the beauty of saying Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Shema Yisrael, listen Yid. Havaya, true oneness, Elokeinu, is where my consciousness comes from. But in truth, Havaya Echad, it's all one. And then after that we say, B'yadacha afkid ruchi, into your hand I entrust my spirit. I'm letting go of my consciousness. B'yadacha afkid, where is it here? Text 9, page 164. Our sages instituted the practice of reciting the verse, B'yadacha afkid ruchi, into your hand I entrust my spirit, or the translation here, I deposit my spirit into your hand, each night before going to sleep, just after reciting the bedtime Shema. We should meditate on the idea that we are depositing, I'm gonna leave the rest of the thing unread. The meditation that I understand from this text is that as we go to sleep, we can be aware that we are relinquishing our consciousness into the divine oneness of unconsciousness. Because, again, my consciousness, my separate individualness, represents a concealment of the truth of the oneness. And so if I lay down to sleep, and I intend that consciousness should be turned off, I am relinquishing my ruach. I'm relinquishing my human spirit. Forget the spirituality part. I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm relinquishing the human mind. That's the ruach. I'm relinquishing the human mind, which is, of course, the beginning of the self.
That's what needs to sleep.
That's what sleeps. Because the body is still there. Right, the body is still there. Body isn't going anywhere. But what disappears when we sleep? What goes to sleep when we're sleeping is the human mind. Right? So that act of sleeping can be a Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Havaya Elokeinu, Havaya Echad moment. It's a moment of true oneness in the divine when we were consciously saying, B'yadacha afkid ruchi, into your hand, God, I entrust my mind. I'm going to let go of my mind. I'm going to let it go. And that is returning ourself to the source of life. And that is
So it's almost like we're recharging our mind.
I'm saying that it's not recharging is self-serving.
But we don't recharge.
I'm saying that the moment of sleep in itself is a sacred and holy state of being. And we can be conscious of that right before we fall asleep. Then the recharging part is it's true that the reflection on that is that when we wake up, we realize that being in oneness with the divine reality is a recharging thing. right? What gets tired? The human mind gets tired. The self gets tired. What needs recharging? The self. The universe, if as I am one with the universe, I don't get tired. Right? There's no, who cares if you get tired, right? You care that a cell falls apart and becomes one and degrades, and the constant the death and recycling of cells. We don't notice that, right? We don't feel that as a tiredness or as a tragedy or as a loss, because it's all part of the universe. It's only the self that feels tired. And what needs a fresh start? What needs a second chance with another day? The mind. But all of this goes back to the Biyad Chav Gidruchi, that as I return to the divine consciousness, that is a profoundly recharging and renewing. There's so much grace and so much opportunity and so much love and so much hope in the fact that I have been one with the divine reality. And finally, work. Text 13. Page 168. Omar Rava. This is from the Talmud, Shabbos, page 31a. Rava taught, when we depart this world and face heavenly judgment, each of us is asked, Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna? Did you conduct business faithfully? Page 168, text 13. Did you conduct business faithfully? Traditionally translated, were you honest in your business dealings? So what happens if I didn't do business? It says, did you designate times for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? Did you long for the final redemption? Did you engage in dialectics of Torah wisdom or attempt to extract a fresh concept from an existing one? So the first question that's asked is, did you do business with faith? Did you faithfully conduct your business affairs? The Rebbe explains, text 14, the way the Talmud phrases the heavenly inquiry, did you conduct business faithfully, allows for an alternative understanding. Not only does it include an inquiry regarding our honesty and integrity faithfully, but also about our spiritual approach, full of faith. Was your mundane and material work saturated with emuna? Nasasa v'nasato be'emuna. Did you do business with emuna, filled with a consciousness of God? What is the divine consciousness? What is the emuna that's present in business? So this is text 15, with which we started. The entire purpose of creation is to create a home for God within this material world, a realm of existence that sits at the bottom of all creation, but beyond which there is no lower dimension of existence. For that reason, our primary work and the overwhelming majority of our pursuits are not in sacred matters per se, for that would be similar to the spiritual service of a soul in heaven that has yet to descend to the earth, or that has already died and departed from the earth. Rather, our primary engagement is to engage with mundane and material entities. As the Torah instructs us, 6 years shall you sow your field, indicating that we should introduce holiness and divinity even to the soil of a field, the lowest dimension of existence, thereby creating a home for God in the lowest of realms. So let's consider this, friends. In our work, we have another place of self, which is greed, need, the potential for taking advantage of another person. Right? Capitalism, creates this barrier between the haves and the have-nots potentially. Don't get nervous. I'm not going to talk about socialism. But at the same time, business is another opportunity for us to show the interconnectedness of one human being with another. That you have what I have not. And I become richer when I do business with you. Or that together, all of us, in doing business with each other, we can create great endeavors. Right? This is the difference between right? There's one level at a farmer, right, who lives under his own fig tree, and he sustains himself. So there is a kind of symbiosis, there's a kind of unity between the human being and the earth. But when I want to eat more than just my figs, maybe I want to have some milk, and I'm busy growing figs. So I'm going to do business with somebody. I'm going to buy their milk and I'm going to sell them my figs, right? So because of that desire, what ends up happening is now not only am I in symbiosis with the earth, I'm also in symbiosis with my fellow human being. And when I eat also, and when okay, leaving the sleep aside. So the idea of business, the idea of commerce, engaging in financial transactions with each other is another opportunity to demonstrate the divine reality of the oneness of the universe. But again, the emunah part of it is very powerful, because also it means that we, when we make an investment, if I'm going to grow my figs, I'm going to grow more than I need to eat in the hopes that I can sell it and buy milk. There's an act of faith in there. I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't know if I'm going to have a buyer for my figs. And so what do? I trust that the cycle of the universe, the interdependence of the human species is going to all work out. That is, I'm trusting in the divine truth of the oneness of the universe. I'm trusting in the reality of our interdependence. I'm letting go of what I can control, and I'm giving myself up to the emunah. I'm giving myself up to trust that it's all okay. It's all going to be okay. Because the whole universe is helping each other. We're all working together. And that's the difference between whether I do business with aggressiveness or whether I do business with gentleness, with ethics. If I see my business dealings as a manifestation of the oneness of my interconnectedness with my fellow human beings, then it doesn't make sense for me to be too aggressive, too greedy, and certainly unethical. Then I'm kind and encouraging and grateful, and of course honest, because I want this to be as holy and as wholesome, to demonstrate the holy and wholesome interconnectedness of the human people, of the human race, of society. And so therefore it doesn't make sense for me to be dishonest, because that would deny the divine reality that is expressed. And also, of course, if I'm worried about not being okay, then I'm not interconnected. So that's the presence of Hashem in our work. The Dira B'Tachtonim, the dwelling place that is in the lowest states of consciousness, the one that wants what they don't have. Right? Think about it. We talk about all the things that you talk about low consciousness, right? Lower mind. The three things that the lower mind has are hunger, tiredness, and what's it called? Desire, cravings, not hunger cravings, but greed, right? And all of these three things, all of these really low, vulnerable, very unholy consciousnesses potentially open ourselves up to the highest divine connectedness. Through our hunger, we can become aware of the Melech HaOlam, the order of the universe and the interconnectedness of the organisms in the universe, and how we, through our absorbing the energy and becoming one with the plant, and of course, the plant is now learning Torah. The plant that I ate for lunch is now learning Torah with us, right? Because the energy in the plant is now in the divine oneness. And then in my sleep, in my tiredness, that's the call to turn my mind off and to give myself in to the truth of the divine oneness in which I know nothing at all. And then, of course, in my greed, there is the potential for me with emunah. If I temper it with emunah, with faith in God, I can become aware that society is interconnected and that we are all one. We're all supporting each other because our source is in the one. So the meditations today, with our last minute, the first meditation is Baruch Atah Hashem, Baruch Atah Havaya, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Borei Peri HaAdamah. Let's say that's meditation number 1. So let's try and be a little bit more aware when we say that baracha. The second meditation is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, V'yodacha Afkid Ruchi Padisa Osi, Hashem Keil Emes. Into your hand I entrust my spirit, O God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And the last meditation is when we do business and we get $1, we say Baruch Hashem. Simply saying Baruch Hashem, blessed is Hashem, or I have Baruch Hashem, I am a source of blessing to Hashem. I am bringing the divine reality into this interaction. Every time we get $1, we say Baruch Hashem, and we give tzedakah, and we again demonstrate that interconnectedness of society and our connection with each other. That's achdus, that's echad, that's the oneness that reflects the truth of the divine reality.